Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted the Wurrgog Prophet Headkracker from HEDKRAKKA'S Mad Mob for Warhammer Underworlds. And here he is, Headkracker from Warhammer Underworlds, and in this video I'll show you step by step how I painted him to a good tabletop ready standard using mostly contrast paints and some layer paints. And here's the model, all primed using the Citadel colour Wraithbone contrast undercoat, and this is perfect for using all these different contrast paints, and I'll put a link below in the description so you know exactly what paints we use with some links on how you can find them. And the brush I use is Kolinsky No. 2 size synthetic brush, which is perfect for these models. Right, let's get started, and the first paint is going to be Plague Bearer Flesh, and this is going to go over all the flesh areas, so any area of skin that you can see, we're going to put a nice coat of this Plague Bearer Flesh, and we're not going to put loads of paint on, just a nice light even coat all over the model. And we're not trying to use this contrast paint to give us any shade at all. This is the paint we're going to use to come through the next stage we use on the skin, so this will come through as our highlight, and we'll put a shade on this later on, and that's where we're going to get our shadow, but this will come through that shade, giving us a real nice yellowy green highlight to a darker green shade. And this I found is the best combo that I like from all the different skins. I've tried loads of different ways to do that, and you can see some other videos on my channel where I've painted one of the other members of HEDKRAKKA'S Mad Mob and also done a colour test with all the different greens and using the contrast paints. But in the end I went for this recipe of using Plague Bearer's Flesh underneath and then a green shade, which I'll show you later on. And I saw this from an online YouTube channel, and this was a great painter who I got this idea from, and that's a channel called The Painting Coach, and I'll put a link in the description below so you can go and check that out if you'd like to. But I tried recreating what he did just with contrast paints by doing 2 layers of contrast paints, but I couldn't get the effect that he did with the shade. So definitely the shade I found is best. I got close with one of the models, which you can see here, but I think the shade is easier, quicker, and certainly got the best result. Okay, so while that Plague Bearer Flesh is drying, we're going to take some contrast Horde, and this is going to go over this kind of wooden mask that he wears. So everything you can see here is a mask. I used a bit of that Plague Bearer Flesh green on the mask too, and I'm kind of copying the box art that came with the Underworld set. But this is going to give us a real nice light beige colour to the wood, and we'll use this a little bit thicker than we did with the previous stage where we did the skin, because we want this to go in those recesses and give us a little bit of shade, a little bit of shadow, and this works really nicely. And then we'll pick out all the little skulls that's hanging off him, so these little bird skulls here, any little bones or horns, and then we'll also do this really big skull on top of the stuff here as well. So what I find I do is I put more paint on when I get to these bigger areas, and then as they've got like more recesses in nostrils, in eye sockets, I'll put a little bit extra paint on the brush and then start and end my brush strokes where I want most of that to build up. Next I'll get some BASILICANUM grey, and while that skeleton horde's still wet, I'm going to put a little dot of the grey just where the horn meets the binding, and then I'll do a wet blend on the model on top of that skeleton horde. And then I'm also going back and forth to the pot where I'll get a little bit more skeleton horde on my brush and then just mix that together and smooth it out so we get a nice quick fade. And this is a really nice effect on bones and teeth and things like that to make it look a bit aged, a bit worn, and really quick to do, really easy. Just blend the 2 colours together. Now while I got that paint out, I'll just do this little stone rune that he's got here. There's also another one around the front too, and I'm also going to do all the fur in this nice grey colour as well, and I think that'll work really nicely. On a previous model I did the fur light and I didn't think it worked that well, so I found this grey was a lot nicer. It also ties it in when we paint the rim of the base as well, and we do the base in this colour as you can see here. I'm just going to do that now. That'll tie the kind of piece together, so I think having that grey on the base and then on a little bit of the model at the top is good too. So give this a nice coat. I'm putting a lot more paint on the base, there's loads of recesses there, and then I'm also going to get that skeleton horde back and just paint in the little bones you see protruding from the ground, and so popping that on, and being quite generous again with this paint because we want to give this a nice coat, and it doesn't matter if it goes into the grey a bit. Next it's Magos Purple, and this is just going to be for the little bit of skin that you can see from the fur cloak that's almost folded back, so I'm just going to use that for the inside. This is almost like the skin on the underside of the fur. And then also on his cloak, I'm going to do the inside of the cloak in this colour as well, again just to represent that kind of paler skin. And with this, it's a large area and I want to get it done quite quickly in one go, so I'm putting quite a big blob of paint in the middle of the cloak and then spreading that around with my brush, pushing it and pulling it where I want it to go. Then I take some Vollupus Pink, or Vollupus Pink, I don't even know if I'm saying it properly, and then I'm going to put this all over the little bit of material he wears, their little groin cloth, or groin or loin cloth, and then giving that a nice coat. There's some recesses here we want it to go into, so you can be a little bit more generous with the amount of paint you're putting on. And this is a great colour, this pink. It gives a really nice shade and shadow on its own, and this will work really nicely against that green. And then just when I get to this little bit here, I've got a little bit less paint on my brush as I want to get it a bit neater. And then we turn the model around and we're going to do the back of the cloak in this pink as well. And now I'm getting quite a lot of paint here. Ideally, I want to do this with a bigger brush because then you'll get better brush strokes with it. But I'm just sticking with the number 2 throughout this model here. And I'm just going all over it now, trying to get nice long strokes from the top to the bottom. Again, starting that brush stroke where I want most of the paint to pool, and then just pulling it down and coating it across the model nice and evenly. We'll do a little shade over this at the end just to tidy it up. Sometimes when you do large flat areas with contrast, it helps to either do 2 thinner coats or go over one of the coats with another colour or a shade, and that just evens it out and stops it looking kind of patchy. But certainly a bigger brush would help that as well, and would get you a nicer finish. So again, just being nice and tidy, taking my time, and then moving on to the Apothecary White, and this is just going to go on this little jaw part of the mask that he wears. Apothecary White is really like a grey colour, so what I've tried to do here is not cover it entirely up to the edges, so the edges would come through almost like a little highlight underneath. Then I take some Saigour Brown, and this is going to be for the wooden handle of his little staff there, so just give that a nice coat. Again, don't be crazy with the amount of paint you put on, just enough to give it a nice even coat and let the texture of the model do the work for you, pushing and pulling that paint where you want it to go, and then keep moving the model so that you're not moving your hand and your brush and you've got complete control of it. Then we're going to take some Shyish Purple. This is a darker purple than the Magos we used earlier, and this is going to go for this weird thing at the bottom of his stuff, and this is going to be a really nice colour to use. This is going to work really nicely on the model with the green and with the pinks that we've already used, so this is really nice colour. And then while I've got that paint out, I'm just going to put a little dot on this little gemstone he's got in his mask here. And I made a little mistake here. I wasn't very tidy at all. You can see I've moved the model now. I should have done that at the first, but I was being a bit lazy, so I took some Wraithbone, tidied up around it, and then went back over it with the Plaguebearer flesh. And that's the great thing about contrast paints. You make a mistake like this, it's really easy to tidy it up. Once you do that Wraithbone with a bit more contrast over it, you'd never know anything would have happened. And now we can move on to some Snakebite leather, a really great colour. And I've decided to use this for the leather pouch and for the snake, and that was probably a mistake. I should have used a darker wood, maybe even the wildwood, for his pouch here, because it clashed a bit with the snake, and so I end up going over this with a couple of different shades later on just to change the colour up a bit. But I think I'd recommend wildwood rather than snakebite leather for this pouch, but it's all down to personal taste. And then I'm going to pick out all the little straps and bindings and give that a nice coat, and this works well up here. This didn't seem to clash with the snake colour, it was just that pouch because it's quite large and it's also on kind of the same level of the miniature, so I think that didn't help. But here we are, and I'm just picking out the little bits now, and now starting on the snake. So it's great to be able to use snakebite leather on an actual snake, so this is the first time for that, so that was cool. And then I'm just turning that model again, making sure I'm kind of nice and relaxed. I've got my arms braced on the table so I can keep my brush steady, and then as I move the model I've got all that control on the brush stroke just so I can get those lines nice and neat. Then I'm back to Skeleton Horde, and this is going to be for the underside of the snake, and so this is going to work really nicely against that snakebite leather. Then I took some Agrax Earthshade, and this will give you like a brown colour, and I thought I'll go over the pouch here just to darken it up a little bit, and we'll see how that worked. You'll see later on I also put some Nuln Oil on it as well, just to get it even darker again, because this didn't do it enough. But yeah, again, go with wildwood, I think, and then you wouldn't have to do this step of the shade and everything on the straps. Then I took some Nazdreg yellow and I picked out some of those feathers giving it a nice coat, working it into those little crevices and all the different areas of the feather to bring out that texture, wiping my brush against it to get that paint where I want it to go. And then the Akhelian green, which is actually blue, and I picked out some feathers with that too. Same process, kind of start your brush where you want most of the paint to build up, use the contour and texture of the model to get that paint off your brush and into those little cracks and crevices where you want it to go. Then we're on to Gryph Hound Orange. We're going to use this for these little tassels on the front, so just give them a nice little coat, put enough paint in there so it goes into all those creases, and this will give us a nice shadow. Again, turn in that model, make it really easy for yourself. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed painting this model. The Wurrgog Prophet is one of my favourite models from all of Age of Sigmar miniatures you can get. So I had great fun doing this. Then I got some Flesh Tearers red, and again picked out some feathers. So we're using loads of colours on this guy, and it's really up to you what you do with all the different feathers and the different colours. But I pretty much just copied the box art as close as I could. Then I took that shyish purple and just did another little feather in that, and that ties it in with that weird thing at the bottom of the stuff too. So it's nice to have, if you have one colour like that, just to try and include it somewhere else on the model. Then I took the Creed Camo, and this is a nice colour, dark green, really nice this, and so I just used that to give our guy a little manicure there. So I'm just picking out those nails on each hand. I didn't do the toenails, I left that as it is, and I noticed on the box art that the toenails aren't painted in either, and so I just went for the fingernails on both hands. And this is quite fiddly, so make sure you just move that model, make it really easy, take your time, don't put too much paint on the brush for this stage. Then it's Saigour Brown again, and for this I'm just using the Saigour Brown for the little ankle like bracelet if you like, and he's also got one on his wrist too, so I picked those out. Again, we're matching that Saigour Brown from the staff over to this side of the model now, so those colours are kind of turning up on all different sections, so really tying it all together, and then on the and just finishing there on the ankle, and so that's going to tidy that up really nicely. Then we take the Biel Tan Green, and this is a shade, and this all over any skin areas is going to give us our final colour, that real nice Aurac green, not too bright, not too dark, just right, just in between. And then we're going to really use the texture of the model now to get that paint into those recesses, and this is going to give us the different shades and our nice shadow. But that Plague Bear flesh is really going to come through nicely to give a nice yellow highlight, yellowy green highlight coming through. So on those more flatter raised areas, the shade will settle thinner, but on those recesses it'll really want to get sucked in there and pull up, and then that's going to give us some real nice contrast. So I really like this, and I think the painting coach completely nailed it. This is a great recipe. I'm really glad I found this video and saw him do that when he was painting some orcs, so I can highly recommend giving this a go, especially after trying all different combinations. I think this is certainly my favourite. Then I took some Null Oil Shade, and this is like a black version of Agrax Earthshade, and I just went over the feathers. I just wanted to bring out some of that texture a little bit more, and I found the contrast paint on its own didn't quite do that, so just working it in there. And then just to neaten up that cloak a little bit, I thought I'd see what would happen if I put the Nuln Oil over it. It also changes that pink, so it's not crazy pink, it just tones it down a little bit, and this worked really nicely just to bring out a little bit of shadow in those creases. Then the Magos Purple again, and then I'm just going to really carefully now, hardly any on my brush, almost like a felt tip pen, that amount of paint. I'm just trying to go in those little triangular recesses there and just put little bits in, almost along just where the lines of it are, and then tracing inside this little rune mark here as well. And that's going to just give a nice finish to that part, bring it out really well. Then I'd take some Wraithbone paint and put a tiny dot on each eye of the snake. And then this is going to be the base for when we add another paint to give it some nice bright green eyes. I used a smaller brush for this just so I could get an actual dot on the end of the brush, and then just popped it on there. And then when it was dry, took some technical Weystone green, and this is like a glossy paint, and just a little dot of this is going to dry really nicely. It's going to make those eyes really stand out. Again, a smaller brush just to try and get a dot right on the eye there. Then I took some Sky Grey 0.989 from Vallejo, my very vegan makeup brush, got super soft bristles, perfect for a bit of dry brushing, and I just loaded the bristles of the brush up, worked that into the bristles, and then tried to get as much paint off as I can on some cardboard or paper towel, and then I'm just going to use that to do a real heavy dry brush all over the base. And then I also thought, while I've got it on there, I'll pick out some of the feathers too, just to give them a little highlight and Here we go, you can see I'm do that now. Quite heavy-handed here, probably a little bit too much, but it was nice just to catch the edges a little bit, and using that grey works really well, especially on the blue. Then I took the Nuln Oil again, and then I went all over the base once that was dry, that dry brushing stage was dry, and gave a real heavy coat of this Nuln Oil all over the base, and that's going to dull down that heavy dry brush, but also really bring out the depth to those cracks and crevices. Then I took some Abaddon black, a bit of blue tack, popped that on the end of my brush, and then I stuck that blue tack to the base of the model, and that gives us a little turntable that we can use to paint the rim, and so we don't have to get our hands all over it then. And then just with that black, a nice thick coat. You might want to water it down and do a couple of coats, but I just went for one thick coat all the way around, using that turntable so I can almost keep my brush in the same place, and then that's the final stage complete. And there we go, there's our Wurrgog Prophet Headcracker from HEDKRAKKA'S Mad Mob, painted to a good tabletop ready standard, using mostly contrast paints, some shades, and a tiny bit of dry brushing. And I've got to say, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I finally got the green how I wanted it, and just this model was so fun to paint. And here's the lineup with all the different models, each painted in a different style of green, so you can have a look and decide which one you like the best. And these are definitely one of my favourite Underworlds warbands. I really like them, and having the Wurrgog Prophet and this kind of Wolverine character in there, perfect. And these two are definitely my favourite from the set, but also the different recipes I used on their skin tone really came out as I wanted it. So really happy with both of these. If you'd like to see how I painted Wallop the Skull from the warband, I've done a video for him too, but I've got to say his skin came out a little bit too bright for me, but you might like it. And I've also done that video where I went through all the different green combinations of contrast paint, but I've got to say, after making this video, definitely go with the Plague Bearer Flesh and that Biel Tan Green that, as recommended by the painting coach. It's a great combination. I'll put links to all the paints we used in this video in the description below, and there'll be affiliate links to Element Games, but those links won't cost you anything extra. In fact, you can save up to 20% there on all your paints, models, and all your game accessories, and every sale made through those links I get a small commission, and that helps me do loads more videos like this, and you really help to support the channel, so thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page, and thanks to everyone who's joined so far. It's really awesome. We hang out on Discord, talk about the hobby, share ideas and help each other out, and you'll get some perks there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link in the description, and it'll be great to see you there. I hope you enjoyed the video and that this gave you an idea of how easy it is to paint these models, especially these Underworld models. They're so good, and the bases are all formed, ready to go, and they're just great fun to paint. But I'd love to hear what you think about this, so please join in the comments section below. It'd be awesome to hear your feedback. But thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.